Today's cafe is about Pressero, and you have not just me. Actually, Helena is going to do most of the work. I'm just here for decoration purposes, not entirely. But I think I'm going to start by going through some of the basic stuff. So we wanted to talk about Pressero, and we wanted to talk about one specific aspect of Pressero. Pressero, for those of you who don't know, but I think everyone will, is a web-to-print system, and that means that it has a lot of setup that you can do around products. It has a lot of setup around all kinds of other aspects to do with ordering, like shipping methods and payment methods and so on. But when you talk about products, one of the important things is how do you calculate the price of a product? If a user goes to the site, what options do they get for products, and what is the price that is calculated for that? And both of these things can be done with, or are done with pricing engines in Pressero. And you see a nice example there. So just to explain that as well, I am talking, Helena has control over the slide. So if it's not entirely synchronized, it's because I have no real linear train of thought with these things. So the example that you see here is a business card. You have the, this is actually how the website for this, or the web page could look. On the left-hand side, you have a preview of the product. On the right-hand side, you have a quantity, which is a field that is always there for a product, but then you also have a number of options. And then at the bottom, a price that is calculated for those options. And the question is, where do these come from, and how many different ways do we have to calculate these, and how flexible can you make that? And so there are different types of pricing engines, and we're going to show some of them. We're not going to show all of them because, and we will explain why as we go through them, but we are going to show some of them. There are very standard ones or simple ones, which are the ones under the number 1 there, unit of measure and price breaks. And then we're going to show you a more advanced one that uses a spreadsheet. There are 2 options that use a spreadsheet, but if I'm not mistaken, we're only going to show one. That's because I don't like the other one. And then there are other options on the external pricing engine side as well. And we're briefly going to talk about them, but are not going to go into too much detail there, because that will come back in an upcoming Four Pees Café as well on the 6th of May. Okay, so how do pricing engines work in Pressero to start with? I'm going to do this, and then Helena is going to walk you through the individual pricing engines. But how does this work in Pressero? Well, as with a number of other things in Pressero, you have general preferences, and then you have things that are set up for different websites that you are managing and the products on those websites. Pricing engines are defined on the general level. You have your installation of Pressero, and then in there you have preferences, and these preferences allow you to set up things like the shipping services that you want to use, the payment services you're going to use, and also the pricing engines. And this makes sense. If you have business cards, the logic behind the options that you offer on business cards and the price calculation that goes with them is probably going to be the same or very similar, even if you would build multiple business-to-business websites, for example. So the setup of a pricing engine is on the highest level of your Pressero installation. And then on a product level, in a particular website, you're going to define which of those pricing engines you want to use. And that means that you could set up a different pricing engine for every product that you have, or you could set up one very complex pricing engine and use it for all the products on your website. And both are viable strategies.
Okay. And before, I'm not able, yeah. So before I show you how exactly these pricing engines are set up, I will also show you that you can link different pricing engines to different user groups in Pressero, because Pressero works with user groups, and that allows you to link other pricing engines to other users. So for example, right now, this is a demo shop of a fictive brand. And right now I'm logged in under my name. And if I would go to, for example, this product, I will see this pricing engine here where I can choose between the quantity and select a certain size. But if I would now log in under David's account, as you can see here, I'm logged in under his account right now. And if I would now go to the exact same products, I will see a completely different pricing engine here. So that is something that you can also configure in the backends.
I'm not going to ask how you got my password for this site, but...
Well, I created an account for you.
But this is important. And even in Pressero, you have open sites and closed sites. So you could potentially create a site that is open to everyone and where there are certain calculations. But if I log in because I happen to have an account, that I would see a different pricing engine, a different price. All of that can be set up for groups of users on the website.
Exactly. And as David mentioned earlier, the pricing engines are created on a general level. So these are created in the preferences area of the backend of Pressero. And David also mentioned that the kind of pricing engines are kind of divided into 3 categories. And the first one are the more standard pricing engines. And with these pricing engines, you can only determine the quantity. So only the quantity will determine the price here. And I'll show you how exactly this can be created. So here, when I would add a new pricing engine, you can see the different kinds that David discussed earlier. And the first standard one is the unit of measure. So here, simply the price will depend on a unit that you insert yourself. So let's give it a name first of all. And what we need to do here now is define each unit that you want to offer to your customer. So let's say for this example that we're creating a pricing engine for some flyers. And we offer flyers, just a single flyer, and that the customer can then insert the quantity themselves. But we also offer packs of flyers, and then the price will be a little bit cheaper. So let's say single flyer where the quantity is 1. So I was just explaining the unit of measure pricing engine, and there, as I said, the price will only depend on the chosen quantity. The next thing that we have to insert here is the weight as well, because this is important for the shipping costs that needs to be calculated. So let's say, for example, 2, and the price would then be €0.5. Units like euro and so on don't have to be inserted here because that depends on the site settings. And these 2 are optional, and most of the time they are used as a description. So for example, if I would like to insert the grammage here, I can do so. And this way 1 line is added. And if I would now want to add another line for another unit, and in this case, it was the pack of flyers. So single flyer, and here the quantity will then be 100. The weight will be, say 40, for example. And the price will in this case be, for example, 40 euros and 50 grams. And let's another layer, another units for
the price you add is for the total of 100 flyers, then for the second one, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
This would be, I'm just going to insert something random now. And let's say for this one, 150. And it's actually already linked to one of the products. So if I would now go to the back ends, to the front ends and to the flyers, I will see the price shown here. And what the customer then needs to do is choose a quantity and select the units here. So that's it for the unit of measure. But if you want to work with price ranges, that's also possible. And I will show you that first of all in the front end itself, and that is linked to this product. So here it works the same way with the quantity, but here you're working with price ranges. So the customer can then choose between a certain quantity, and the price will then depend on the range where the quantity is in. So for example, if I would now insert 8, the price per piece will be 175.
Yeah, so these two resemble each other very much, but the second one is really allows the customer to pick whatever quantity he wants, where in the first case, you're restricting it to certain numbers that make sense because you're making a pack of flyers or something like that. This particular one would be already more appropriate if you're doing stuff in, for example, sign and display, where you say you can buy 1 photo print or you can buy 4, but depending on how many you order, the price is going to go down slowly. So that would be more appropriate for something like that.
Exactly. So these two pricing engines are a bit limited regarding the options that you can link to them. So if you need more options, like for example, for the banner, where there are multiple finishing options, or you need to give the customer the possibility to add grommets and so on, then you will probably need another pricing engine. And in Pressero, there are 2 that can be used, and they both work with Excel. So as I just said, this one will be used for more advanced options. And also if the calculations are a bit more complex than the other pricing engines that I showed earlier. And the Spreadsheets Methods works with Excel. And basically you can use any existing Excel file as a pricing engine in Pressero. And how it works is then with the first sheet in the Excel file. And that is the sheet that Pressero communicates with. And of course, there needs to be certain structure in the Excel file itself. And I will explain you later what exactly these parameters are. But it comes down to it that you need to create quantity parameters, option parameters, and also you need to define the output cells of the total price at the total quantity.
So from a technical point of view, because sometimes that's hard for people to understand how it works, Pressero implements an Excel engine, meaning it has an integrated component that knows how to read Excel files and how to write back into Excel files. And that means that you can create an Excel file and upload it to the system, and Pressero knows how to get information from it, and then write stuff back to it and have calculations done in the spreadsheet. But of course, you will have to tell it where the information is that it needs to read and write.
And this is then an example of such pricing engine. This is an example for t-shirts. And to make it a little more structured, we divided it into 2 parts here. And at the right, we have then the different options. So these are all the options where the customer will be able to choose from, and also the options that will determine the price. And on the left, the calculation is done. But let me go back to the PowerPoint again. So first of all, we have the option parameters. So for the t-shirts, in this case, it is the brands where the customer can choose from, and also the size of the t-shirts, of course. And then he will also have the possibility to choose the print, so whether or not it needs to be printed on the front only or on the front and back as well. Then also, as I said earlier, the weight needs to be defined because this is important for the shipping provider. And then in case of t-shirts, if they need to be printed, there's of course also fixed costs for the cliché that needs to be created. And then on the left, we are doing the calculations. And the most important cells here are the total price and weights. So this is what the customer will see on the front end. So this is the total price and weight actually. And then we need to define the fill-in fields. So these are all the options that will be given in the front end. And the values that are inserted here are also the default values that will be shown on the product page itself. And for this calculation, we also used some intermediate results because otherwise the calculation in this field would be a little bit too complex. So that's what we did. And I will shortly go over the functions used to calculate this, but not very much in detail because that's of course not the most interesting part here. But what we did basically to calculate the t-shirts, the price of the t-shirts here depends on the chosen quantity, of course, and also on the chosen brand and chosen size. And to calculate this, we use the index and the match function. And with the index function, you can pick a value from a two-dimensional range using a column and a row index. And these indexes are then determined by the match function. And the match function then searches for the value that is inserted here in the row here. Same thing for the brand. It will search between here and the index function will then seek a match of these two, and that's how the price will be calculated. And then that's also multiplied by the final chosen quantity, of course, because that's also determines the price.
To be very clear, this spreadsheet looks the way it looks because that's the way we wanted it to look. You can use whatever spreadsheet you want. You can organize it any way you want. The only thing you have to make sure of is that you clearly define what the options are in such a way that you will then be able to pass them on to Pressero. And the same for the price calculation and the weight calculation. But if you want to structure this in a completely different way, then you could very well do that. Yeah? And if we were making a pricing engine here for a banner that has completely different options, then it suffices to have not the options we have here, but have the different options that you normally would have for a banner, and that would work just as well.
Indeed, and what's also important to mention is that in this case, I use the index and match function, which are built in Excel. But of course, you can use any other function as well to calculate the price. So that's completely up to you. And another in-between result is for the print, and there I use the same functions. Same for fixed costs. So a cliché needs to be created every time, but if the customer chooses between front and back, there of course needs to be two clichés created. So that also needs to be taken into account for the calculation. And then of course, the final price is a sum of all the previous calculations. And then we still need to calculate the weights. And again, I use the index and match function for this one. And here we need to look into the size and also the weight, because that will depend on the chosen size. And then of course, it's also important to know how exactly it will communicate with Pressero. And therefore, you need to define the different output cells. So first of all, you need to go to the backend of Pressero and choose then, of course, the spreadsheet pricing engine. And then we need to fill in a few things here. And the first thing is the output cells. So these are the ones in yellow where the final calculation is linked to. And then the quantity parameters need to be filled in. And here you need to define a few cells. The first one is the name of the quantity parameter. The next one is the default value, and then the range of all options. In this case, there isn't a range because there is only one, because it will be a fill-in field. But if it would have been a range, such as the option parameters, it would be shown here, because these works the same way as the quantity parameters. So that is it basically, and this is what it will look like on the front end then. So let me also show you this. And now I can choose between the sizes, the colors, and so on. So that's it for the standard and advanced pricing engines. And now I will give the word back to David because he will discuss the advanced pricing engines as well.
Yeah, so there is, if you want more flexibility in than what is offered here, there is one more option that you have, which is harder to show because it requires development, and that is an option of having an external pricing engine. And if you would look in the backend, Helena, and you show how to create an external pricing engine, then you will see that you don't have that many options. You have the option to provide a URL, and that is the URL that Pressero is going to call. And then you have an option for a service type, which is either SOAP or REST, which is the protocol that is going to be used. In other words, is Pressero going to give you information with an XML file that is basically SOAP, or is it going to be JSON? Which is then basically the REST API. And you have a user and an access token. That user and access token are used for security purposes. If you create an external pricing engine, then the idea is that Pressero is going to communicate with that pricing engine. And obviously you want to make sure it is only Pressero that is communicating with it. So that is why you can protect it with a username and an access token if you want to. In this particular case, there is nothing more that you really need to do in Pressero itself, except for when you link this pricing engine with a product. There is also an ID, a product ID that you can specify, and that product ID is going to be communicated to the external pricing engine. But everything else is up to this pricing engine. Yeah, Pressero, every time you go to a product page where this type of pricing engine is used, Pressero is going to pass you a question and say, what are the options for this product, given the product ID, and then what is the price for that product using those options. And what service or how you provide the response is up to you. You basically have to create a web server. That web server has to listen to what Pressero asks it, and it has to give a response. What you get from Pressero is the options that are already selected by the user. So if you, as a user, if you start selecting options, your pricing engine will get the options that are currently selected. You can use that to dynamically provide other options, for example, and you have to use it to calculate a price and a weight. And that needs to be returned to Pressero. It is more difficult, of course, in the sense that this would mean you need to set up a web server that Pressero can talk to. And how you do that is not important. We have done something like that using Node.js project that is called, and where you then do the calculations and talk back to Pressero. You could also do it without having a real server. Amazon has ways of setting that up, so that you can do calculations and can be called and whatever, but you don't really have to configure a server. The only thing you have to make sure of is that it is quick enough, that the response to Pressero comes quickly enough, because every time you touch a product and you change an option, your external pricing engine is going to be called. So it cannot wait 5 seconds each time that it has to do a calculation, or your client using the website, the Pressero site, is going to go crazy and walk away. So much more flexible than the spreadsheet option even, but of course it is also more difficult to implement, because you have to set up a web server and have to write actual code in order to return the results. If you want to do something that is very complex, where maybe you want to hide options based on other options, or you want to change the values of options based on other options, then this external pricing engine is, well, by far the easiest way to implement things. But yeah, more difficult than just using a spreadsheet. There is this type of external pricing engine offers an additional possibility, and that is something that we are going to talk about, is it 2 weeks from now, May 6th? The option you have there, or the question that we very often get is, well, would an external pricing engine allow you to link Pressero as a web-to-print system with an existing MIS system, for example, because the price calculation very often, and the definition of the products very often, is already done in the MIS system, and you don't want to maintain prices in two different areas. Yeah, the answer to that is yes. If you want to do or want to have a good integration, then in most cases there will need to be a closer integration than what you can do with just a pricing engine. And on May 6th, we are going to show exactly that, between the data line multipress product as an MIS system and Pressero as the web-to-print system. And then you'll see that it goes further than just doing the price calculations and the options, but it also involves getting things that are ordered from Pressero into multipress, that you can then talk about what happens with invoicing and all of those things. But there will be a full demo of how that works between multipress and Pressero on the cafe on May 6th. Okay, so some questions, and I think this is more or less what we wanted to show on our end. So if you have other questions, please let me know. There is already a question on, is it possible to have this example file? Yes, of course, Cedric, that is not a problem. But again, the Excel file that you use is completely up to you, and you can use whatever Excel file you want. You just have to make sure that the mapping is correct. But we'll get you that example file. I have made one that is a little bit more generic, not for a particular type of product, that we can probably also share. Yeah, so that was one. Second question, is it possible to easily change pricing engines as things change? The answer is yes. If you would go to product or to a product somewhere, Helena, just to show again how that part works. So in the definition of a product, there is a definition of the pricing engine. You can see that there on the left, you have all the pricing engines that are available. On the right, you have the one that is currently selected. Yeah, but you can just select a different pricing engine. So you could delete the one that is there, select a different one, and then when you save that will be immediately available. The other thing is that here is again where you define the groups. So you could even use the same pricing engine, but with, or rather, different groups and different pricing engines. That is all defined in there. And if you would, under step 2, Helena, if you would look for an external pricing engine, I think if you type DVD, you should find some. Yeah. Actually, that is probably a Spreadsheets pricing engine. Sorry. So which one would be, now you'll have to scroll, external pricing engine there. So if you select an external pricing engine in Pressero on the product page, then there is what they call an MIS product ID, and that ID is sent to your external pricing engine. Yeah. So if I build a web server and I create a URL that Pressero is going to call, one of the parameters is this product ID, and using this product ID in my Node.js project, for example, I can calculate. Yeah, I can not calculate, I can know for which product I'm supposed to return options and price. That is the link between the product that you have and the calculation that the external pricing engine is going to do. That is not available for each of them, but for the external pricing engine, you have that, because the external pricing engine is then also used by MIS integrations like the multipress integration I talked about, to know what the MIS product is that is supposed to correspond to the product we have here in Pressero. Okay, any other questions? I think not. So just to recapitulate that, pricing engines are set up on the general level in Pressero, which means that they can be reused in multiple sites and in multiple products, but you can just as well have a different pricing engine for each product. You have the very simple ones, like unit of measure, where you just say fixed amounts of product that can be ordered, or you have the ones that are based on price breaks, where it is well, volume-based ordering, and typically a lower price for higher volumes that are ordered. Then you have a kind of an intermediate one, if you want, which will already be more than sufficient for most environments, which is the spreadsheet-based one, where you set up any spreadsheet you want, and in the setup in Pressero, you make the link between Pressero and some of these spreadsheet fields. And then if you want to go even further than that, you need to look at the external pricing engine, which will give you a lot more flexibility, but which will at the same time be much more difficult to set up and requires a much higher advanced implementation costs, because you will have to write code and create a website and so on. But from very easy to very difficult, I think that gives a nice overview of the options that you have in Pressero. Probably the one that is used the most with all of the projects that we've seen are the pricing engines based on spreadsheets, because those allow you to define all kinds of options, but they are still very easy to implement.